Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to another episode of the Cobra Kai After Show on AfterBuzz TV. Has evil returned to the valley? Is history doomed to repeat itself one more time? All those questions answered and more in just 1 second.
You're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Oh, I thought we were going to start on the best around. I forgot we don't do that anymore. I was hyped. I was about ready to just jump out of my chair.
Very sad.
Yeah.
Very sad that can happen.
How can you be sad when Cobra Kai is back? Really,
There's no
honestly.
such thing as sad. It's just
isn't.
bad.
Yeah, it's all bad.
It's getting bad.
So guys, we are back in studio at season 2. There's so much to talk about. It's a binge show, obviously. The whole thing is out, so there's so much, like, we literally could talk about 10 episodes straight right now. But this is the first episode of season 2 Cobra Kai. This is Mercy, part 2. I got a stacked panel.
We do. Look at this.
This is good. This
This
is a good
is
looking
crazy.
panel.
Yeah. We are ready to go on this panel. Just saying.
The energy in here is fantastic too. I mean, if like getting these on, I don't know if you guys like when you're putting it on, you're like, oh, it's go time.
It is.
You're like getting in the zone far before we even stepped in here.
It got real.
Yeah.
I drove over here in my
You did not.
I did. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
So yes, this is exciting. There's a lot to talk about, and I think because we have limited time per episode, just because you know 10 hours back to back would be hard.
Yep.
We want to jump straight into things.
Let's do this.
You know, we'll get to introductions in a second. I think talking about the new cast member is the place that I really want to start, and that's Marty Cove. As a buddy of mine actually grew up calling him Uncle Marty, and so because he told me that, I have been calling him Marty Cove ever since he came back to the show. His name is not Marty Cove, it's Martin Cove. But he is back, and he's evil, maybe. I'm not sure.
No, he is.
He is.
It's pretty clear.
I have no hope for the guy.
You have no hope for Kreese? Well, obviously, you're Miyagi Do.
Obviously. I have a lot of negative emotions. Clearly.
You know, I think just so everybody knows kind of who they're dealing with here in Miyagi Do, this is Veronica Valencia. She's
Hey, everyone.
So she's returning. How you doing?
I'm good.
Yeah.
How are you, Ben?
I'm very well, Miyagi Do. Rounding out Miyagi Do, we have Tami Goveia, who just actually did we just did the Paley Fest carpet. We got to interview the cast just the other night.
Insane.
Yeah.
And the only reason that I have any faith in Marty is because he's such a great guy.
He's the story.
He's such a great. He's so sweet. He's so nice.
So he wants
some
something.
So
Yeah, we'll queue up the interview I did with him at some point during, maybe not tonight because it's the first episode. It's like, he tells a Sly Stallone story. It's amazing. It's one of the funniest things that's ever happened to me on a carpet. Michael Clouse, I've never done a show with you before.
We've never done a show
Known you for
together,
years.
and now we're on the same team too.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it wouldn't have been appropriate if we were together and not on the same team. We're a power team here.
If I hadn't come back and you had just taken my spot, I really honestly feel like Kevin would have had like a new star pupil running the dojo. So like, I feel like I had to come back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
Rivalry.
So, now that the intros are out of the way, let's get back to Kreese. First and foremost, it's a pretty obvious bad guy. Like, whereas Johnny Lawrence, season 1, he's an anti-hero. Kreese, you just like, he is a straight 80s bad guy movie guy.
Yeah.
And like, do we think that it's going to go that way the whole time? Is it that obvious?
I hope so.
Oh, sweet. Okay.
No, I want him. I want him to do his thing.
Yeah.
I want him to do his thing, and he's the opening of the show. Well, it ended, season finale, and then it opened with him in the shadows. I mean, that's one of the all-time best openings of any show, seriously, because you knew who it was. The shadow, the music, it was phenomenal.
Did you guys ever watch the movie MacGruber with Will Forte?
I did not watch MacGruber. I mean, I obviously watched MacGyver. but-
MacGruber?
Yeah, no.
Oh,
Have you heard of MacGruber?
one of my favorite.
MacGyver?
It's a spoof
knockoff.
It's like an action movie spoof thing.
Yes.
And there's like a line in there when he's like talking to his old like general or whatever, and he's like, "You forgot, MacGruber. I taught you everything you know." And that's an actual line that he says in here. It's like straight out of an 80s action movie. It's been said like 17 times in famous movies. So I was like, okay, they're really leaning into this. And it's like you should look at him and be like, not everything, and then flip him over, but he doesn't quite go that far.
I just kind of want to say, I agree with you, Tami. I hope that he stays a complete villain because, as we had kind of seen in the first Karate Kid movie and in last season, Johnny was more of our anti-hero, our antagonist. So we kind of already got that, like, you might love to hate him kind of character. And I feel like Kreese should just stay the you hate to hate him kind of character.
I think the difference too is like obviously last season when they brought back Johnny and Daniel, like they look different than they did as kids. So you're like, oh, maybe this is a new person. Marty. Now you got me saying Marty Cove. Marty Cove. He looks the same. I know. And so you're like, that almost mentally tricks you into thinking, okay, he is not a good guy still.
That guy takes remarkable care of himself. If you had to guess right now, what age is Martin Cove?
Early 60s.
I would say 59.
I would have said like 60, early 60s.
Marty Cove is 73 years old.
What? It's insane.
That guy's like Denzel Washington
So we
level
need to
taking care
start
of
smoking
himself.
cigars.
Yeah, right?
Because that seems to be the
Wow.
trick.
Crushing it. I feel like he could kick my ass.
Good for him.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he definitely could. Yeah, good for him. So he is crushing it. He comes back. He claims that he regrets his actions.
Whatever.
I think it's all nonsense. I don't think he really does. I actually do think that he is a true 80s villain. I don't think that there's I think they're gonna give us like a red herring, and there's a lot of those, right? Like the trash catching on fire in the opening scene.
Yep.
That's like a classic red herring. You're like, oh no, is it gonna burn down? No, they're just trying to raise the tension. They just want you to think like maybe something's going on here, right? So they fight. Then we cut from that scene. The next piece of the show is we kind of get the birth of Miyagi Do. So we get to see a sweet montage with some like good 80s throwback
So
music.
good.
Yeah.
Oh my
great.
gosh.
You know, Robbie, and he's painting. And like, I was pretty hyped. I was pretty hyped on that. Are you guys Robbie fans? I mean, you like him as a character?
Here's the thing. I don't dislike Robbie. I do like Robbie, but I think our two kind of male leads on the opposite side of the mat, I prefer Miguel. I really enjoyed Miguel's character development last season, and I do like how Robbie has developed, kind of went from a delinquent to kind of like this stand-up guy, and I really appreciate that. But I don't know. I think I just enjoy Miguel.
Yeah,
but I don't dislike Robbie.
Yeah, I like the total compare and contrast that they're putting out there. Of Miguel almost seems like a bad guy who will turn good. Robbie seems like a good guy who could turn bad.
Right.
And I don't know what I'm hoping for, because you don't want anyone to turn bad. I mean, as I'm wearing this part of Cobra Kai, but I think that is a hard thing, because would they have one switch and not the other, because they are on such opposite sides.
Right. Well, yeah, I think that there's a lot of ambiguity, like morally, to these characters in a way that in Karate Kid 1, really if you read into it now as an adult, you probably see more of it. But in the 80s, like that does feel a lot more like a black and white movie. You have the good guys versus the bad guys. Obviously Marty is a bad guy, and Johnny's, you see some sympathy, right? But like he's still kind of a bad dude. He's totally bought in. This show doesn't really want to do that. They really want you to be behind just about every single character.
And that's what I love about it. I love, like you said, the ambiguity, because the characters are so fleshed out. You can empathize with just about everyone. Whether they make extreme choices or not, you can still sit back and go, but I get it. I get it.
Yeah, and I think one of the nicest things about it is that they don't ever stray away from the idea that like Ralph Macchio and Billy Zabka are just they are forever going to be kids who kind of hate each other on the inside.
Yeah, and they still act like it. Like you watch a show, it's like, come on, guys, you're acting like kids.
Yeah, and it's like a begrudging respect, but they still just kind of despise each other. And that's like in all the conversations that Robbie's having, and like he's like, great, we'll take him down, and then in the next sequence, Ralph's talking to his daughter, and he's like, oh, we're gonna destroy him, right? And she's like, I don't want to, they're my friends.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, that's a nice scene. So actually, speaking of which, I think you get some stuff with Sam, and one thing that I thought was really interesting is we all have like lived now for 10 years in like a social media generation. It's like a thing we're very used to. We all literally did an Instagram story the minute before this went live. Like in the writing, she's on Instagram blocking Miguel. Like it's part of the writing. Like it's an understandable piece of writing enough now, not just for the target audience, but like it's part of the lexicon, blocking someone on Instagram. The idea that everybody has an Instagram, enough that they would understand what that means in the show.
And I cringed when she did that. I went,
And they show it from the perspective of Miguel too, of like the feeling of looking it up. It's not just the action of like, okay, yeah, you're blocked. It's the other side of like, ooh, that when you really feel it.
He looks her up and he can't find the user. We're like, oh, we know what that means. We've all known that's happened to someone before. Yeah.
Oh, it's never happened to me. Has it happened to you, Ben?
I just thought it was so interesting. I was watching that. I was like, man, things really have come a long way. This is just writing. It's modern writing. I can't remember who. I think there's a very famous screenwriter who said it, but hated writing technology. I think it's Christopher McQuarrie said he hates writing technology in his movies because nothing dates a script more than technology. Right? So if you watch a movie from 50 years ago, I guess that's a little far, but if you watch a movie from 30 years ago, it's like stuff from the early 90s, the late 80s, like the computers and the phones, it kind of changes the way plotting even works now, right?
It's interesting that you bring that up, Ben, because I feel like in response to that, we're seeing more media nowadays where it's like they kind of blend the two things. Like they have modern technology, but their fashion attire and their surrounding areas and everything that they do around them in their day-to-day lives is more of like in the past.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like you can never tell in what era they're living. They're just living.
For sure. So continuing to talk about Sam a little bit, she's kind of conflicted. She obviously misses Miguel. Her heart's broken. I think feels like they're going to get back together eventually, doesn't it? Right?
I feel like that's a good hope to have because we realize that Miguel went down a wrong path, but he still has a heart of gold. He still can be self-aware enough to realize that he has done something wrong to the point where I feel like he's just not complete evil like Kreese. Yeah. So I feel like there's obviously a chance that I wouldn't put it off the table.
And they're including characters in his story that allow him to stay good. His family. Obviously, you're talking about his heart of gold, and his family is still there as they were, in the last season with that fight. Like you can't root against his family, so you can't fully root against him. And with Johnny, we see that he wants to be good. Right. And so I think that they're surrounding Miguel with pieces that are allowing us to have hope for him.
And what I do love about Sam and Miguel is I feel like they both need to go down their own paths right now. But at some point, they have to come back together because we saw them in the beginning and they were so good
Do you see them then together at the end of the season?
Not right. Oh, end of the season? No.
I'm making you jump in with a prediction
Season 3.
early here.
Season 3.
Well,
Because there will be a season 3.
Because on the other hand, you could have like more of a catastrophic move. You could have one of them go down a really dark path and be like a villain. Like Miguel could just become a bad guy.
You think so? I don't think so because of Johnny.
It would break my heart.
Yeah.
And that too.
Unless Kreese sucks him in. But I think I don't think that's going to happen with Miguel. I think Kreese will suck Hawk in, but I don't think Miguel will get sucked in. But I don't know.
Guy's turning into a villain.
Oh, he's so good.
Oh.
He's so good.
He's too weak-willed to understand the lessons properly. Yeah, I do absolutely adore the idea that there's a lesson in every single, and like even so much so that there's a line, and he's like, if you can get a metaphor out of that, then right, because it's like poking fun at the whole idea of it. So, but now talking about Miguel and Johnny a little bit and their relationship, so Johnny has been fighting this demon since season 1. The hardcore demon of like, I do not want to repeat the mistakes of the past. I don't want to be Kreese. I want to do this a different way. But of course now Kreese is back in the picture and he's having to contend with this idea. Like, I became who I am and I learned all the things I learned from this tough love. Can I do this in a way that supports these kids?
Is there still a silver lining in the way you're doing things? And I think that's where, talking with Kev and watching this, and I know Kev's watching at home, but he's like, I'm Johnny. And every time I hear John Kreese say something, I'm like, oh, part of that's Kev. Him talking about, the world is weak in these trophies and what is it? And I'm like, oh, that's actually not a bad thing.
It was like watching an episode of The Tomorrow Show.
Yes!
It was literally like, I was listening to Kevin as he's like, kids get participation trophies.
Yeah.
What's the line that he says? It's like, we got to stop we got to stop the ass kissing and start the ass kicking. I think that's his line, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, that is a Kevin Undergaro quote. I mean, in like a joking way, but also in like a believing like you should work hard for what you have.
And that I think is what keeps you on edge too, because you're like, is this really bad?
Right.
Is there hope?
Yeah, I mean, he disciplined his students to be the best fighters in the valley, and they were conditioned to win the tournament, which like winning is great. I mean, we all love to win at things in life. It's not like losing is better than winning, but obviously his students, Hawk and Miguel to some degree were. They interpreted their lessons incorrectly, and so they targeted weakness, which is where that line comes. Do you want to destroy, kill the strongest animal, the weakest animal, right?
Can you have one without the other? I think it's the yin yang. Yeah, you
That's
go.
a really good point.
I think that's going to be the storyline throughout as we're torn and being like, are you able to do this? Wait, this is good, but no, it's 90% good, 10% bad. But can you have the 90% without the 10%?
Right.
It's, it broke my heart when Kreese apologizes to Johnny. I was like, really? I didn't buy the
Didn't buy
apology.
it.
No.
But to see Johnny come out and go, don't go, and Kreese just smiled.
I know. Well, that's the 80s
Well,
villain
it's
thing.
the 80s villain, but there was just that moment of, I know Johnny has a path and he wants to do right by these kids, but he's so wounded. He's still so wounded by his past.
Two things I have to say to that.
Yeah.
I feel like he can never fully get rid of Kreese in his heart because that was his father figure growing up, in a sense. And two, I feel that Johnny, he's on his path and he wants to do things differently. And he wants to make a better life for himself. And I think part of that journey for him is forgiveness, is giving second chances, because he's kind of getting a second chance at doing things over. And he probably thinks, I should lend the same favor to someone else.
Yep. Yeah, I thought the best line in the whole episode is when Kreese says to him, "Just remember, kid, I am the guy that always rooted for you." And I was like, yes, I'm in. I'm on board with Kreese. Because I love that.
Liar, liar, liar. That's all I hear is lies.
It's kind of true, but it's also, like, he is kind of lying, but it's also kind of true, don't
It
you
is
think?
kind of true, but there's,
Yeah.
there's ulterior motives.
the
There's never
90-10.
unconditional.
Yeah.
That's the great 90.
Yeah. Oh, the other part of this. Sorry, Kevin, if you're watching, just because I thought of you so much, we have to watch this movie called Over the Top. He says we have to be ready to discuss. I was like, that is like, again,
Sly
straight out of the
Stallone.
Tomorrow Show. You guys have to watch Star Trek. Be ready to discuss.
Yep.
I was
Yeah.
like, this is so good. That's so good. So okay, getting to the final scene of the show, we're at the hardware store, and Johnny sees Robbie with Daniel, and the line then after this confrontation that comes is he looks at him and says, "He's a better man than you'll ever be," which is
Broke my heart.
Yeah.
It's the line that cuts
tough.
Johnny to the core.
It's tough.
That relationship, when does that relationship going to get mended?
I
And
hope
how?
I hope it gets mended soon. And this is a particular storyline that I struggle with because, I mean, I am not a parent, but I feel like that's kind of crossing a line when, you don't, if you're like spending time with someone else's child, but not kind of involving that parent if it's something, as we'll see in the next few episodes, something happens with Robbie, but he's not getting Johnny involved. I think that's a little disrespectful.
See, and I think that goes back to that Johnny doesn't know what to do. He's still so wounded. Like, he wants to be there for his son, but he doesn't know how to do it.
And he didn't have a father figure in his
he
own
doesn't know
life,
how
so
to do
he's
this.
learning as he goes.
Yeah. So I can't fault him for it. I agree with you, but at the same time, I can't fault him because he's not equipped. He doesn't get it.
So on the side of the other father-son, father-daughter relationship, you have Sam and her resistance to wanting to be a part of this training experiment, Miyagi Do. And he gives the line about, the turnaround, backwards kick, you leave yourself vulnerable or whatever, There's definitely some TV writing in the show that is a little too, like, it's a little too on the nose, I guess. Like, that's a moment. Or, like, when Kreese has his line in the diner and he's like, "Have you ever heard of brumation?" I was like, "Oh, you guys are trying really hard. You're, like, looking for the thing." And
Is that a real thing?
I'm not sure, but it's just there was those moments where I was like, okay, this is TV writing. The other thing that I thought was really interesting, just before wrapping it up with Sam and Danny, is like they definitely are writing this for you to get into it without having seen season one. There's exposition there that I think I was wondering if they were gonna do, like in the kitchen when Luce's wife is like, "Are you happy they broke up?" And he's like, "Well, of course I'm happy that she broke up with Cobra Kai's star student." And you're like, you know what I mean? It's like he wouldn't say that necessarily. He might just be like, "Yeah, Miguel sucks." Like,
Yeah.
but it's like exposition. It's TV writing,
Yeah.
so you need it. And I thought that was
Yeah.
interesting the way they're structuring it, so that if somebody does want to get into season 2, they don't want to have to watch season 1.
Do you feel it's too much? Or like, is it slightly distracting if you have seen season 1?
It feels like every fifth beat, like 4 out of 5 they get it right, and then every fifth beat there's like that moment where I'm like,
It's stretching a little bit.
but on the whole, I'm loving it, and I'm a big fan of it, and I'm all in, like I'm totally hooked. That TV doesn't get me as much as it used to. Like it takes a special show to really hook me. And this show I'm like really into. So.
Yeah.
I did have a question. Carmen, Miguel's mom, and Johnny. What do you think
I ship
about that?
it.
Do you ship that?
I ship it.
Yeah, the Tres Leches cake.
Oh, which is delicious, by the way. Have you guys had Tres Leches?
I have
cake?
No, it sounds
Never.
amazing though.
Have you
I
ever had
tried
Tres
it
Leches?
once, it's really
I went to Costa Rica like 2 months ago, and it is huge down there, and I had it every single day.
It's very sweet.
It is amazing. You can go to Vallarta here in Los Angeles, and they have it.
Ooh.
That's something
Really
I
good.
take it. That's something you've
That
done.
is something I have done. Delicious.
So I think because this is a streaming show, I don't necessarily want to do predictions just because we're all going to watch so many episodes back to back to back to back to back. It's going to be very hard to like honestly predict when we actually just know what happens. But what I will say is based on at the end of episode 1, where do you want it to go? Rather than where you know it's going to go, like what's the storyline you want to see? Who are you the most invested in right now? Like why don't we start there? Who is the character you're the most invested in the story right now?
I would honestly probably say Johnny, just because especially with the introduction or the reintroduction of Kreese, you could tell Johnny is going to be fighting this battle because Kreese is going to want things his way, and Johnny's going to have to do a lot of pushback to make sure that he stays on track of his overall goal and not let Kreese kind of, manipulate his students the way he manipulated Johnny. So I'm rooting for him, and I'm really hoping that, he finds the ability to better communicate so that way, people don't want to go the other direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Johnny and Kreese together, that relationship,
Yeah.
learning more of the backstory is what they've done such a good job of doing that. Like, okay, why does each side feel this way? And I think that is something that is really intriguing that you could never tackle in the Karate Kid. It's like, oh, we're understanding the characters more and maybe their feelings of why. So I think with Kreese, of just knowing that, of like, why are you like this?
Yeah.
Did you not have a thought? Was there something early on that impacted you to be like this? I'm very intrigued.
I really want to see LaRusso just back off Johnny. He's so judgmental. And
very
just
harsh.
when he's about to give him just an inch, he sees Johnny and Kreese walk out of the store and he's back to judging him again. So I really want LaRusso to just learn some lessons, take some meditation, and I want them to work together because they're going to need to work together to fight Kreese.
I think for me, it's Billy Zabka. It's definitely Johnny is the character that I'm the most invested in. But I'm really curious about Miguel. That's the other character who I'm like, what way is this guy gonna go? Yeah. And if he really develops, he continues to have that edge. But that's a character that I'm very fascinated by. I can't wait to see what happens. So yeah, the episode ends, and basically, the two students now in Miyagi Do, and they feels like they tease the possibility of some romance maybe with Robbie and Sam. So we'll see what happens there. There's a lot of things for us to catch up on.
I'm intrigued who Sam's gonna fight because they're training her to fight someone.
Yeah. 100%.
And is that Johnny? Is that Miguel?
Is it Aisha?
Yeah, it's Aisha.
Former friend?
I'm not sure.
But she said she didn't want to fight them.
They're her friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First rule of Miyagi Do. Karate is only defense. She won't be fighting no one.
It's all about that rule 1. So we're going to wrap up episode 1 here, guys. If the folks want to find you and follow along with what you're doing, Michael, where can they find you?
You can find me on Instagram and on Twitter at TheOnlyMC.
Veronica.
I'm Veronica Valencia. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at it's me, Veronica_V.
And you can find me on Twitter at Tami Goveia and Insta, Facebook, Tami Goveia Official.
You guys can find me at Ben Bateman Media, Twitter and Instagram. Be sure to check out the Paley Center interviews that Tami and I did with the cast of Cobra Kai. We may actually play some of them during the show, but we got everybody in the show, the creators, everybody. So really, really exciting. And thank you guys for tuning in and watching. We'll be back in just a little bit with episode 2.
Our founder, Kevin Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.